If you're reading this, it means my father finally spoke the words he carried for 50 years, words heavy enough to break him and somehow gentle enough to put me back together. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Kitchen Table Talks. I'm Pat Sajak, and tonight we're sharing a story that's not easy to hear, but one that deserves to be heard. Before we begin, if you appreciate stories that remind us who we are and what we carry, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your stories, your voices, they matter here. Tonight's letter comes from a man in Klamath Falls, Oregon, a son who witnessed something many families know too well, a veteran who returned home from war but left pieces of himself behind. His father never spoke about the battlefield, not once, until the final night of his life. This is his letter. Let's begin. My name is Jonathan Hale, and for as long as I can remember, my father, Thomas Hale, was a quiet man. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, not the gentle hush of an early morning with coffee on the porch. No, Dad carried a silence that felt like a locked room in a burning house. He lived in a one-story rental on Myrtle Street, just 4 blocks from Crater Lake Highway, the kind of house with weathered porch steps, a sagging carport, and wind chimes that never seemed to stop trembling even on calm days. Whenever I visited, I always felt like I was entering someone else's life. Someone older, someone bruised. Dad served in Vietnam, though he rarely admitted it. The only proof hung in a crooked frame, a faded photograph of his unit, Bravo Company, taken sometime in Mo Ngin Chin Chum Samui Chin. He was 20 back then, lean and sharp-eyed, the kind of young man who believed he was untouchable. By the time I was old enough to notice things, Dad was already different. His back bent early, his hair thinned too soon, but the silence came first. Growing up, other kids bragged about their fathers. My dad played quarterback. My dad's a mechanic. My dad fought in the war. My dad fought in the war too, but I couldn't say it with pride. I didn't know what he had done. I didn't know what he had seen. I didn't know anything, because he wouldn't say a damn word. When I was 9 years old, I asked him what Vietnam was like. He put down his fork. He looked at me. His lips trembled just once, like his soul had been caught off guard. Then he said, "It was hot and nothing more." Mom told me not to ask again, so I didn't. By the time I reached my 40s, Dad and I drifted into a rhythm of polite distance. Holiday phone calls, birthday cards, a Christmas visit if I could manage the drive. I convinced myself we had made peace with the emptiness between us. But I was wrong, because emptiness doesn't stay neutral. It grows, it spreads, it pulls roots out from the inside. Which brings me to the night everything changed, the night I received a call from Riverbend Hospice, telling me my father had collapsed beside his bed and that family should come quickly. I drove 4 hours through rain-soaked darkness, headlights carving tunnels through the fog. I don't remember most of the trip, just the sense of dread, the unmistakable feeling that I was late for something far more important than a bedside goodbye. Dad was lying under thin blankets when I arrived, his chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. His eyes, once so sharp, were dulled by pain and time. But when he saw me, he managed a weak smile. "Hey, kid," he whispered. I was 47 years old, divorced, with a son in college, but the way he said kid made me feel like that 9-year-old boy again, begging for a scrap of truth. I took the chair beside his bed. I didn't know what to say. He didn't either. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The hum of fluorescent lights blended with the slow beep of the heart monitor until I couldn't hear the difference. Sometimes Dad would drift off, mumbling broken sentences I couldn't catch. Sometimes he would grip the blanket as if bracing for something only he could see. At one point he whispered, "Don't let them drown, don't let them." Then the words fell apart. I pressed his hand. "Dad," I murmured, "it's me, Jonathan." His eyes flicked open. And for the first time in my life, for the first time in 50 years, he spoke about the war. Not gently, not gradually, not as a story, but like a dam bursting. He said my name again, trembling. "Jonathan, there was a boy I couldn't save." I froze. He tightened his grip on my wrist, surprisingly strong. "I need you to listen," he whispered. "I need you to hear the things I buried, because I can't. I can't die with them inside me." I nodded, unable to breathe. He swallowed hard, and what came next was not a story, it was a confession, a man's final attempt to unburden a lifetime of unspoken grief. He closed his eyes, inhaled, and said, "It started on a riverbank near Guangxi, the night your life began to change before you were even born." And then he began. My father's voice trembled as he began, the words spilling out like something long frozen, finally thawing. His fingers, thin and cold beneath the hospital sheet, tightened around my wrist as if he feared the memory might pull him under unless I held him steady. "It was Ngin Chin Cham Salmwe Chin," he whispered. "Monsoon season. The kind of rain that made the sky feel like it was collapsing. We were moving along the bank of the Tekhan River, mud up to our ankles, mosquitoes like smoke. Everything smelled like copper and rot." He closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he might drift away again. But no, he was back there, on that riverbank, 40 years gone, but still fresh enough to sting. We were supposed to rendezvous with another squad, Bravo 2, but they never showed. Radio went dead. The lieutenant told us to push forward anyway. His breathing hitched. There were 4 of us walking point that night, me, Reese, Lopez, and a kid from Raleigh named Carter. The name hit him hard. His voice broke on it, like the sound of something fragile cracking beneath weight. "Carter!" he repeated, softer, as if saying it too loudly might shatter him. He was 18, looked younger, couldn't grow a full mustache. Said he'd lied about his age to enlist because he didn't want his older brother going alone. Dad swallowed, pained. He always carried this little tin harmonica in his pocket. Played it when he thought nobody could hear. He was awful. A faint smile flickered, but he played anyway. He fell silent for a few seconds. The heart monitor clicked steadily beside him, the only sound in the room. "We reached a bend in the river," he continued. "The jungle was quiet, too quiet. That kind of silence, when even the insects stop. It means something's wrong." My throat tightened. I didn't speak. I barely breathed. Dad stared past me, not at the wall, not at the ceiling, but at something only he could see. We spotted movement across the river. 3 figures. Maybe more. Hard to tell in the rain. He inhaled sharply, as if reliving the moment physically. I was second from the front. Carter was last. He always took the rear. Said it made him feel like he could watch over us. A small tremor entered his voice. A shot rang out, one single crack. For a second, I didn't even know who fired. Then he swallowed hard. Then I heard Carter fall. The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. Dad's face dissolved not into tears, but into something deeper than crying. A grief older than I was, older than my mother, older than the family we tried to build. He dropped into the mud, Dad whispered. Didn't scream, didn't move, didn't even breathe. He squeezed my hand, a weak, trembling gesture, loaded with decades of guilt. I turned back for him, he said. I should have stayed in position, should have kept low, but I turned. He shook his head, jaw tightening, and that's when everything fell apart. The rain outside the hospital tapped against the window, steady and rhythmic and accidental soundtrack to the unraveling of my father's soul. Gunfire, shouting, static in the radio, then silence. His silence. My lieutenant yelled for us to retreat, Dad said, voice cracking. Orders were orders. We had to fall back before we were overrun. He closed his eyes again, but I didn't move. My breath caught. I crawled to him, Dad said, through the mud, through the water, through fire. I crawled until I reached him. His voice trembled violently. He wasn't dead yet. I felt my chest tighten painfully. He looked at me, Dad whispered, right in the eyes, and he said, Dad's breath shook as if the words themselves still burned. He said, don't leave me here. His tears finally fell silent, slow, unashamed. I promised him, Dad choked. I promised him I wouldn't leave him behind. I felt my own tears rising, but I held them back. This wasn't my moment. It was his. But the lieutenant grabbed me, he continued, pulled me up, dragged me away. I fought him. I swore at him. I screamed, but he wouldn't let me stay. He shook his head, trembling. We left him there, on that riverbank, in the rain, alone. His grip loosened as exhaustion washed over him. But that's not the worst part, he whispered. I blinked, stunned. What could be worse? He looked at me, eyes raw, lost, desperate for forgiveness. He didn't die right away. I felt something crack inside me. Dad's voice softened, fading like a candle in wind. I heard him calling my name as we ran, calling for me, begging. A long pause. I heard him until the jungle swallowed his voice completely. A tear slid down his cheek. That's the sound I dreamed about every night for 50 years. Not gunfire, not explosions, just his voice. That boy's voice. He let out a long, shaky exhale. That's what I carried, Jonathan. That's the silence. You grew up with a boy's dying words echoing inside a man who came home but never truly returned. He released my wrist, his hand falling limply back to the blanket. Outside, the rain grew louder, as if the sky itself was telling the story with him. Dad looked at me, eyes shining through the dim hospital light. "I'm telling you this now," he whispered, "because it's the only way I can let him go." My throat tightened painfully. "And it's the only way I can let you go free from the weight I've been putting on you your entire life." He closed his eyes for a few seconds, breath shallow, chest rising unevenly. "I'm not done," he murmured. "There's more." His voice cracked again. "A lot more." For a long time after he spoke those words, Dad didn't look at me. He just stared at the ceiling as if the white hospital tiles held the face of the boy he left behind on that riverbank. And I realized something then, something I'd never understood until that moment. My father didn't fear death. He feared dying with the truth still inside him. His fingers moved slightly on the blanket, twitching with some ghost of memory he couldn't shake. After a while, he turned his head toward me again. His eyes rimmed red, but sharp, sharper than I'd seen them in years. "Jonathan," he murmured, "that wasn't the end of it." I nodded, gently urging him on. He swallowed, as though the next words tasted bitter. When we pulled back, the lieutenant ordered us to regroup behind a fallen tree. It was barely shelter, just a half-rotten trunk covered in vines, but it was all we had. Lopez was bleeding from the arm. Reese was shaking so hard he could barely hold his rifle. And me, he paused, jaw tightening. I wasn't even in my own body anymore. I kept hearing him. "Carter." His voice carried across the river like the rain was trying to bring it to me, like the jungle itself wanted me to go back. His breath shuddered. I almost did. I sat still, waiting for him to continue. I got up. I don't know why. Instinct, desperation, guilt, maybe all of it. But I stood up, and right then a bullet snapped past my face, close enough to burn the air. He closed his eyes. That saved my life, and it damned me at the same time. I frowned. "Saved you how?" Because if I'd taken one more step, he whispered, I would have walked straight into an ambush that wiped out another squad that same night. My stomach twisted. "They didn't know Carter was still alive," Dad continued. "Nobody did. He wasn't on the roster for the rendezvous anymore because they already marked him as KIA killed in action during the retreat. A mistake." He looked at me, pain twisting through every line on his face. "They buried his name before they ever buried his body." A heavy silence settled between us, broken only by the slow beep of the heart monitor. Dad exhaled deeply. I didn't sleep for days afterward. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him reaching for me. Not blaming me, not angry, just reaching, asking me not to leave him alone. He pressed the heel of his hand to his forehead, trembling, but the Army moved us. Different sector, different firefight, different nightmare. I never went back to that river, not once. His voice cracked. And that's what killed me. Not the war, not the bullets, not the nightmares. It was the promise I broke. He looked at me with a raw, pleading honesty I had never seen in him. "A man can survive many things," he said, "but he can't survive breaking his own soul." I didn't know what to say. Nothing felt big enough, or small enough, or right enough. So I just placed my hand over his. He flinched, not from the touch, but from the emotion behind it. "You know," he whispered, "I almost told you once." My breath hitched. "When?" He stared down at the blanket. "You were 15. You came home from school angry, something about a fight with your best friend. You said, 'Dad, I don't understand why people just walk away from each other.'" He paused, voice thinning, "And I almost told you everything." I blinked hard. But I couldn't, he said, because how does a father tell his son that the person he walked away from died calling his name? The words tore through me. I thought I was sparing you, he whispered, but really I was just hiding. My throat tightened. Dad, you didn't have to carry this alone. He closed his eyes. I know that now. We sat there in the dim hospital room, the storm outside easing into a quiet drizzle. Dad took a slow, shaky breath, then continued. Jonathan, the war ended, but it didn't let me go. I came home, but I wasn't home. Not really. Not ever. He swallowed hard, and your mother, God bless her, she tried. She tried to reach me, tried to make me talk. But every time she asked about the war, I felt like I was standing back on that riverbank, hearing him again. His eyes shimmered. I didn't want her to carry that weight. I didn't want you to either. So I said nothing. I became a quiet man, a distant man, a man living in a house with his family but sleeping in a jungle half a world away. His voice grew faint, but he pressed on. That silence, it was my prison and yours. He looked up at me, truly looked. That's why I'm telling you now, he whispered, because I can't die with his voice still inside me. And I want to go knowing at least one person in this world knows who he was. I nodded slowly. Tell me about him. Anything. Everything. Dad smiled a little sad, broken smile, but real. He liked peanut butter, hated coffee, and sang like a goat with a cold. A small laugh escaped me, the first in hours. Dad's eyes softened. He had freckles across his nose and wrote letters to his sister every Sunday. Told her he'd take her fishing when he got home. He inhaled sharply. She never got that fishing trip. Silence again. Then Dad said something that left me frozen in place. Jonathan, I kept something of his. I blinked. Of Carter's? He nodded, barely able to lift his head. In my footlocker, top shelf in the garage, wrapped in an old towel. What is it? I asked. He stared at me with a mixture of pain and hope. His harmonica, my breath caught, the one he played in camp. I'm the reason it didn't go home. He paused, voice trembling. But maybe it can now. I sat still, heart pounding. I want you to find her, Dad whispered. His sister. She lived in North Carolina, last name Carter. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if anyone is left. But if someone is, he swallowed. I need them to know he wasn't alone at the end. He tightened his grip on my hand with a sudden, desperate strength, and I need him to forgive me. My chest caved in. I'll find her, I whispered. I promise. Dad breathed out a long, fragile exhale that sounded like relief. Good, he murmured, because the next part, it's the hardest. He looked toward the window as if afraid of what he was about to say next. The river didn't take just one boy that night. He paused. It took two. My heart stopped. He turned back to me. One of them didn't die, but he never came home either. A shiver ran through me. Dad, what do you mean? He whispered. I left someone else behind that night. For a moment I thought I'd misheard him. The rain outside the hospice window had softened into a whisper. The dim yellow light above his bed flickered once, humming faintly. My father lay still beneath a thin cotton blanket, his breathing shallow, his eyes half open, but the words he had just spoken were sharp enough to cut the air in the room. The river took two boys that night, he repeated, voice trembling. One died. The other never came home either. I leaned closer. Dad, I whispered, who are you talking about? He inhaled. The sound ragged and painful, as if even breathing through the memory hurt. There was another soldier, he said, a boy on the other side of the river. I froze. You mean, yes, he whispered, North Vietnamese. Maybe Viet Cong. Maybe just a kid dragged into a war he didn't ask for. He looked away, eyes distant, drifting back to a world only he could see. He couldn't have been older than 16. Skinny, barefoot, shirt torn. He was hiding behind a tree when the firefight started, but he wasn't firing. He wasn't even holding his weapon properly. He looked terrified. Dad swallowed, the guilt rising in his throat. I saw him, he whispered, and he saw me. He shut his eyes as if the memory itself was blinding. For 1 second, we were just two scared kids in the rain. I felt a tremor run through my hands. And then, Dad continued, another rifle went off. One of ours. Maybe Reese. Maybe Lopez. I don't know. But the bullet hit him. My father's voice cracked. He grabbed his stomach, fell to his knees, and looked straight at me. His breathing hitched a sharp, painful gasp. And Jonathan, he wasn't angry. He wasn't reaching for his gun. He reached for me, like he thought maybe I could save him too. Dad pressed his palms into his eyes. I crawled toward him, he said. I don't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe guilt, maybe because he looked so young. His fingers clenched the blanket. But then the lieutenant pulled me back again, screaming, dragging me by my pack straps. He paused. And the last thing I saw was that boy, face down in the mud, water rising around him, disappearing into the river. A long silence followed. He drowned, Dad said, voice breaking, and I didn't even know his name. I felt something heavy settle into my chest. So when I say the river took two boys, he whispered, I mean one was from Raleigh, North Carolina, and the other was from a country we were told to fear. He let out a long, trembling exhale, and I left them both. The heart monitor beeped softly, each sound a reminder of how fragile this moment was. Dad, I said quietly, you didn't kill either of them. His eyes snapped toward me, raw, hollow, and filled with something deeper than guilt. I didn't save them. His voice cracked through the dim room like a broken piece of glass. That's the part that destroyed me. I reached for his hand. You didn't have a choice. He shook his head slowly. A soldier always thinks he has a choice until it's gone. He stared at the ceiling again. That boy, the Vietnamese one, he started appearing in my dreams about a year after I came home. Not as an enemy, not as a ghost, just a kid standing by the river, looking confused, lost. His voice softened to a fragile whisper. I don't think he hated me. I don't even think he understood what happened. He just stood there, watching, waiting. A shiver crawled up my spine. You kept seeing him? Yes, Dad swallowed. All my life, behind me in mirrors, in my peripheral vision, in the quiet parts of the house. Not a spirit, not a haunting. He paused, just a memory refusing to die. He turned his head toward me, eyes glossy and fearful. And I kept hearing Carter too, his voice, calling my name. Some nights, I'd get out of bed thinking he was in the hallway. He closed his eyes. My silence wasn't just guilt, it was fear. Fear that if I said their names out loud, the memories would swallow me whole. He gripped my hand suddenly, his fingers surprisingly strong. But now I don't have time to be afraid. I squeezed back gently. You don't have to be afraid anymore, I said. He shook his head once. I have one more thing to tell you. His voice turned fragile, like old paper tearing. That Vietnamese boy, I wasn't the only one who didn't forget him. I blinked. What do you mean? Dad swallowed hard. 2 months after the incident, he said, we found a scrap of paper in the jungle, tied to a bamboo pole near an abandoned hut. It had a name on it. He exhaled slowly, painfully, and it was the same boy. My heart thudded. You knew his name? I knew a piece of it, Dad whispered, but I was so afraid of what it meant that I hid it, locked it away, buried it under my uniforms when I got home. His hand trembled violently, that paper still in the footlocker too. Shock rippled through me. You have his name? I asked again, breathless. He nodded weakly. A name and a location. A village, someone who cared enough to mark the place where he died. Tears welled in his eyes. I want you to take the harmonica to Carter's family. He paused. And I want you to take the paper to that boy's family too, if they're still alive. He gripped my hand tighter. Jonathan, I need you to put them both to rest. For me, my throat closed. For us. He let out a trembling breath for all of us. His eyes fluttered shut again from exhaustion, but his lips kept moving, forming one more sentence, quiet, broken, and full of decades of longing. I want them both to go home. For a long time, my father didn't speak again. His chest rose in shallow, uneven lifts, each breath sounding like it had to crawl its way up from someplace deep and collapsing. The beeping from the monitor drifted into the background of the moment. like a metronome marking the slow unraveling of a life. The rain outside had stopped, but somehow the room felt wetter than before, as if the storm had moved inside him. He finally opened his eyes again, just barely. Jonathan, the word sounded like it had scraped against bone on its way out. I leaned in. I'm here, Dad. You know, I didn't tell your mother any of this. His voice had turned faint, hoarse, thinned out by the weight of decades. I told myself I was protecting her. Truth is, I didn't want her to look at me differently. My jaw clenched. She wouldn't have judged you. He gave a weak, tired laugh, the kind a man gives when he's certain of something and wishes he wasn't. Son, guilt changes the way a man sees himself, makes him believe everyone sees him the same way. He stared at the far wall, unfocused. She loved me. God, she loved me. But I always felt like I was living on borrowed time, like I didn't deserve the life she gave me. His breathing stuttered. And you? I stayed distant because I was afraid you'd see the parts of me I couldn't hide. I shook my head, tears rising. You didn't have to hide from me. He closed his eyes. Yes, I did. The words hit me harder than I expected because I knew in some way they were true. Dad wasn't built for vulnerability. Life had carved him into someone who could only be strong by being silent. He'd never learned any other way. He took another slow breath, gripping the blanket like it was the last thing tethering him to this world. The harmonica, he whispered. It's wrapped in a green towel. You'll see the initials carved inside. J-E-C, Jacob Ellis Carter. Carter finally had a full name. I nodded. I'll find his family, I said. I swear it. His lips trembled, almost a smile, almost relief. And the paper, the one with the Vietnamese boy's name, his voice thinned to a rasp. You'll know it when you see it. Brown ink. A little smudged, folded a dozen times. I leaned closer. Do you remember the name? I asked softly. His eyes flickered a sign of strain, regret, and memory fighting to stay alive. Sang. I repeated it quietly. Sang. He nodded once. I think that was it. Could have been his last name, or his first, or just the word for light. I don't know. Everything was confused. But the person who wrote it, they wanted someone to find it. His breathing hitched again. And now that someone is you. A weight pressed into my chest, heavy, real, irreversible. I'll find them too, I whispered. Dad swallowed slow, painful, deliberate. You might not, he said. The village might be gone. The family might have moved. The war chewed up so many places, so many people. His fingers twitched, reaching for mine. But you have to try. I took his hand, feeling the bones beneath his skin, the hand that once held rifles, carried friends, built a home, and held me when I was small. I will, I said. I promise. His eyes closed tight, tears slipping out. I've been carrying both boys for 50 years, he whispered. Carter in my guilt, sang in my silence. He exhaled sharply, and I can't carry them anymore. He opened his eyes, suddenly clear, suddenly present in a way he hadn't been all night. I need you to take them from me, he said, both of them. A tear fell from my cheek to his blanket. I'll take them, I said, every step. He nodded, the corners of his lips trembling. Good. He looked toward the window again. You know, Jonathan, sometimes I'd stand outside in the middle of the night and hear the river. Not really, not literally, but in my head, the rush of water, the rain hitting it, the echoes. That night never left me. His breathing faltered, but he forced the words out. I thought, if I ever told the story, the river would let me go. He turned his gaze back to me, and maybe now it will. I squeezed his hand. It will, Dad. The monitor beeped steadily, too steadily. A rhythm that sounded stretched thin like a rope pulled taut between two worlds. His voice grew weaker. There's something else. My heart clenched. What is it? He tried to wet his lips, but his tongue was too dry. You know how I stopped fishing after the war? I frowned. Yeah, you never wanted to again. He nodded faintly. It's because of the river. Because every time I saw water moving, I saw them, the boys, Carter, and, he swallowed painfully, sang. A tremor ran through his hand. I spent my life avoiding anything that reminded me of that night. But a man can't outrun a river. It finds its way back. His eyes softened. But you can face it. You can bring those boys home. I felt tears spill freely down my face. You're not asking me to just find them, I said. You're asking me to finish your story. He met my gaze with a tired, aching certainty. Yes. And to free you, I added. His lips parted. To free all of us. A long silence followed. He let out a trembling breath, one that seemed to empty him out, hollowing him in a way that frightened me. Then he whispered the words I will never forget. I didn't speak about the war because it was the only way I could survive. A tear slipped down his cheek. But tonight, speaking is the only way I can die in peace. His entire body softened then, like something inside him had just unclenched after half a century. Stay with me, he whispered. I'm right here, I said. He exhaled slow, heavy, final in tone, but not in truth. There's one last thing I need to tell you, he murmured. His hand tightened for a moment. The reason Carter called my name, he looked at me with breaking eyes, and the real reason I couldn't save him. For a long moment, my father didn't speak. His chest rose and fell in shallow, fragile movements. His fingers twitched in mine, like a man tightening his grip on a memory before it slipped away again. I could hear the air hissing from the oxygen tube, the faint buzz of the fluorescent light above us, the muted hum of the building's heater. But inside that room, everything felt impossibly still, like the world was sitting on the edge of a chair waiting for him to finish. The real reason? I couldn't save Carter, he repeated, barely audible. I leaned in until my forehead nearly touched his. Dad, I whispered, you can tell me. There's nothing you can say that will make me love you less. A tear slipped down the side of his face, not fast, not sudden, but slow, like a bead of water rolling down old stone. He opened his eyes. Jonathan, he didn't want to be saved. The air in the room seemed to thin. I blinked. What are you talking about? He inhaled a shaky breath. He'd been hit, yes, but it wasn't the wound that kept him there. It was resignation. His voice trembled, maybe even in tension. I felt my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. He froze, Dad whispered, completely froze. He wasn't fighting, wasn't calling for help at first, wasn't crawling. He just lay there watching the river, like he was waiting for something. He shut his eyes tight, reliving it. That's why I turned back. I thought God helped me. I thought he was already gone. The meaning sank into me, slowly, painfully. He gave up? I asked. Dad shook his head faintly. Not gave up. Let go. His throat convulsed around a painful swallow. He'd been different that whole week. Quiet, shaky, jumping whenever a branch snapped. He told me he hadn't slept in days. He was scared, Jonathan. Scared in that deep, bone-level way a person gets when their spirit is already halfway to somewhere else. A long pause. The night before the ambush, Dad said, he told me he didn't think he'd make it home. I stiffened. You mean he knew? Dad nodded weakly. I didn't believe him. I told him he was just tired. I said he'd be fine once we rotated out. And he smiled, that quiet, hollow kind of smile that people give when they've already accepted something you haven't. My father's face twisted in pain. I should have stayed with him that night, should have talked to him, asked him what he meant, asked him why he felt that way. But I was too exhausted, too wrapped up in my own fear. He looked at me, anguish in his eyes. I missed the signs. I squeezed his hand. You're not responsible for what was in his heart. Dad shook his head with sudden urgency. You don't understand. There's more. His breathing grew unsteady. The monitor beeped faster. That morning, before the rain came, he gave me something. I frowned. Gave you what? A note. My breath caught. What kind of note? A letter to his sister. One he'd written the night before. He asked me to mail it for him if anything happened. His voice broke, and I lost it. He pressed his fist against his forehead like he wanted to punch the memory out of himself. I lost it, Jonathan. Somewhere between the retreat and the chopper landing zone. I tore through my pack 1,000 times over the years, hoping it would magically appear, but it never did. He looked shattered. That letter was the last thing he ever wrote. And because of me, she never got it. I felt my throat tighten. Dad, you didn't lose it on purpose. No, he whispered, but I lost it all the same. His voice grew faint again. When he called my name on that riverbank, I thought he wanted me to pull him out, but now he closed his eyes. I think he just wanted to know if I'd kept my promise, if I still had the letter. A sob escaped him, raw, ragged, tearing through decades of silent suffering. I didn't have it. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. You did everything you could. He shook his head again, barely. No. That's why he looked at me the way he did. Not with fear, not with anger, with disappointment, pain that wasn't just physical. He gasped, and then he slipped under. The room pulsed with a terrible stillness. My father stared at the ceiling with hollow eyes. I've carried that letter in my heart for 50 years, he whispered. Every word I failed to deliver. He turned to me again. And you have to take them both boys home, not just with objects, with truth. I wiped my face. I will. He nodded weakly. Good. Because there's something else. My stomach dropped. Dad, what else? He took the longest breath I had ever seen him take, like a man inhaling before a plunge. The Vietnamese boy, the one named Sang, he hesitated, eyes flickering with shame. I didn't leave him behind just because the lieutenant pulled me away. A chill crawled up my spine. Then why? I whispered. He looked at me exhausted, defeated, broken. Because I hesitated, my breath caught. If I'd moved 1 second sooner, 1 inch closer, I might have reached him in time. But I didn't. A tear slid down his cheek, and I've been living in that 1 second ever since. He closed his eyes. I need you to forgive me, Jonathan. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the back of his hand. I do, I whispered. I forgive you. He exhaled sharp, shaky, a man loosening a noose he'd carried around his soul for half a century. But then his fingers twitched. There's still one last thing, he murmured, voice almost gone. I lifted my head. What is it? He swallowed painfully. The lieutenant never told you, and neither did I. But Carter wasn't the only one who wrote a letter that night. My heart pounded. What do you mean? He looked at me with eyes that seemed older than the world. I wrote one too. The monitor beeped sharply, and I never sent it. For a long moment, his words just hung there in the dim yellow light of the hospice room. I wrote one too, and I never sent it. Those words hit harder than any shell, sharper than any shrapnel. They came out of him like something he'd been choking on for half a lifetime. My father's gaze drifted toward the far corner of the room, as if the letter were still sitting there, a ghost folded into paper and ink. I swallowed. Dad, what letter? He blinked slowly, almost like he wasn't sure he wanted to open that door. After a few seconds, he let out a breath that sounded like surrender. It was the night before, he whispered. The night before the river. Before Carter fell. Before everything I was fell with him. He shifted slightly, grimacing at the pain, but he didn't stop. I was 20 years old. I hadn't been home in 9 months. I was tired, angry, scared, and I didn't know if I'd ever make it back. He looked at me, really looked. So I wrote a letter to you. My breath froze. To me? Yes, he nodded, even though you weren't born yet. Something inside me cracked, he continued, voice trembling. I wrote it to the child I hoped I'd someday have, the child I prayed I'd get the chance to see. I didn't know if I'd survive the next sunrise, so I wrote it like a time capsule, a message to a life I wasn't sure I'd live long enough to meet. He closed his eyes. I told you who I was before the war changed me, told you about your grandmother's garden, about the creek where I caught my first fish, about the dog I had named Murphy because he always got into trouble. A faint smile flickered on his lips, brief and brittle. I told you what I believed in, what I hoped for, what I feared, and I told you that I wanted to be a good father someday. His throat tightened. I wrote that I hoped you'd never see the things I'd seen, that you'd never have to carry the weight of decisions made in mud and darkness. He stared past me again, and then the firefight came, and I shoved the letter into my jacket pocket. I told myself I'd send it when we rotated back to base. A pause. Except we never rotated back. We were moved out, shipped, split, reassigned. And by the time I emptied my pockets, the letter was gone. He let out a broken laugh, bitter, painful. Maybe I dropped it near the river. Maybe it floated downstream. Maybe it was found by someone who couldn't read English. Or maybe his voice softened. Maybe the jungle kept it. Silence settled between us, and when I came home, he whispered, I couldn't rewrite it. I frowned gently. Why? His eyes glistened. Because the man who wrote it died on that riverbank, along with Carter and Sang and everything I was before I pulled the trigger the first time. His breath hitched. I didn't know how to talk to a child after that. I didn't know how to talk to you. Every time I looked at you, I saw the letter I lost, the father I failed to become. The truth struck me like a blow. His distance, his silence, his stiffness during birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. All the times I thought he didn't care, he cared so much, it drowned him. I reached out and placed my hand over his chest, feeling the slow, uneven thumps beneath. Dad, that letter never needed to make it home, I whispered. I'm here. I'm listening. You didn't fail. He stared at me as if trying to believe it. But guilt is a stubborn ghost. I tried rewriting it, he whispered, many times. But each time the word shook on the page, and I thought, who am I to guide a child when I can't guide myself? His voice trembled deep in his chest. That's why I never taught you to fish, why I never told you about the war, why I didn't talk to you about your heartbreaks, your struggles, your fears, because every time I opened my mouth to speak, he swallowed hard. I heard a boy calling my name from a river in Vietnam. A tear slid down my cheek, and I couldn't let that voice out, he said. I was afraid if I said one word, everything else would pour out after it. I gripped his hand tighter. Dad, it's okay. He shook his head. No, son, it wasn't okay. You deserved better. A long pause. And now that I finally found the courage to speak, I don't have much time left to say what I should have said decades ago. He looked up at me with eyes pleading for redemption. Jonathan, I loved you through all of it, even when I couldn't show it. Even when the war stole the part of me that should have known how. My chest ached. I know, I said softly. I always knew. He let out a breath, not quite relief, but close. There's more about the letter, he whispered. Something I've never told anyone. My heartbeat stumbled. What is it? He looked toward the foot of the bed, as if the memory stood there waiting. I didn't just write to you. I wrote about you. I frowned. But I hadn't been born yet. He nodded. I know. But that night, in that foxhole, I saw your face. A chill slipped down my spine. What do you mean? I don't know, he whispered. A dream, a vision, a hope, something between life and death. But I saw you. A boy with my eyes and your mother's gentleness. His voice shook, and I think that's why I survived the river. That letter, that dream, you. I gripped his hand harder. Dad. He inhaled sharply. The letter isn't gone. I froze. What? It's not gone, he repeated, voice quivering. I found a piece of it. A pulse of shock jolted through me. What piece? He squeezed my hand. That's the part I need to tell you before it's too late. He looked at me with eyes full of urgency and regret. Jonathan, someone else found it first. For a moment, the room felt like it tilted. The hum of the heater, the steady beep of the monitor, the faint rattle of wind against the window, all of it dimmed beneath the weight of my father's words. Someone else found it first. I stared at him, breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. Dad, my voice was barely a whisper. What do you mean someone found it? He blinked slowly, like his eyelids were made of lead. The letter, he murmured. The one I wrote in the foxhole. The one I lost. He paused, breath shuddering. It didn't disappear into the jungle like I thought. His hand tightened weakly around mine, a man clinging to the last rope of a story he had buried too deep. It was found, he whispered, picked up off the ground, saved, kept. My pulse quickened. By who? He swallowed, the motion painfully slow. By a woman. I blinked. A woman? Someone in your unit? He shook his head almost imperceptibly. No, a local woman, a civilian. My heart lurched. A Vietnamese woman? Yes. He nodded faintly. She was there that night. Or maybe the morning after, I don't know. I never met her, never spoke to her, but I know she found it. The pieces didn't fit together, not yet, but something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. How do you know that? I asked quietly. His eyes drifted toward the window, as if he could see decades across the snow outside. Because a year after I came home, he paused, breath catching. I got a package. A chill slid down my spine. What kind of package? Plain brown envelope. No return address. U.S. postal stamp. The postmark was from California. He swallowed. I opened it, and inside was part of my letter. I blinked slowly, numb. You mean it was mailed to you? Yes. His voice trembled. But only half. Not the whole thing. Just a fragment, torn on one side, dirty, watermarked. And inside, there was another piece of paper. What was it? A message. His voice nearly broke. In Vietnamese, written by hand, neat, careful, almost gentle. He shut his eyes tight, like the memory was both a knife and a comfort. I didn't understand it at first. I had to ask a man I worked with later. He was from Saigon. I begged him to translate it for me. And what did it say? I whispered. He opened his eyes, glassy, burning, desperate. It said, I found the words of a man who wishes to live. Do not lose them again. My breath evaporated into nothing. And below that, he whispered, was a single name. He let the silence stretch, letting me feel the gravity of it before he spoke, sang. My heart hammered against my ribs. The same sang? I asked. Yes, he said. The boy from the river. But how? My voice cracked. How would he have had anything to do with this? Dad shook his head weakly. I don't know. Maybe it was his family. Maybe his sister, his mother. Someone who loved him. Someone who found my letter on the riverbank after we retreated. A tremor moved through his frail body. Someone who saw the last words I wrote before that night swallowed me whole. I felt my throat burn. Why didn't you tell anyone? I whispered, his eyes clouded with guilt. Because I was ashamed. My heart clenched. Ashamed. Of what? Of the fact that a Vietnamese family grieving their own son, a boy I couldn't save, offered me mercy when I had none left for myself. He swallowed painfully. They gave me back the one thing I lost on purpose. I froze. On purpose? The words came out rough, unsteady. You said you dropped it. He looked at me with a sorrow so deep it could have drowned a city. I didn't drop it, he whispered. I threw it. The room went silent. I stared at him, stunned, breathless. Dad, why? He turned his face away, shame contorting the lines of his cheeks. Because I didn't think I deserved to be a father anymore. Not after that night. Not after leaving those boys behind. Not after breaking that promise. His voice quaked. That letter was hope, a future, a reason to live, and I felt unworthy of all of it. A tear slid down his cheek, so I tore it in half and threw it into the river. My chest caved in. But someone found it, he whispered, and they believed in me more than I believed in myself. He wiped his eyes with a trembling finger. I kept the half they returned. It's in the footlocker, too. I leaned closer, tears blurring my vision. Why keep it if it hurts you so much? He closed his eyes slowly, painfully. Because even pain is a connection when it's the only one you have left. A long pause. That was the last time anyone tried to reach me. His voice grew faint, and I still failed them. I shook my head hard. You didn't fail anyone. They reached out to you. They forgave you. They honored you. He let out a ragged breath. I didn't answer. The truth struck like a hammer. Dad, did you ever write back? No. Why? His lips trembled. Because I didn't know what to say to people who had lost a son I could have saved. His eyes filled again, and I was terrified that if I wrote back, they might tell me he had lived long enough to suffer. He looked at me with a pleading sorrow I had never seen before. I chose silence, Jonathan, and silence is a coward's refuge. My hand trembled as I stroked the back of his fingers. You can fix it now, I said softly. I can fix it. I can go. I can find them. He nodded, slow, fragile. That's why I kept the letter fragment, so that someday When I found the courage, I could give it to you." He winced, pain flickering across his face. "But I waited too long. I waited until my last night." I squeezed his hand. "And I'm here." He looked at me tired, broken, but with a spark of something else. Hope. "There's one more thing in the footlocker," he whispered. "What is it?" His voice softened to barely a breath. "A photograph." "What photograph?" He swallowed hard. The woman who wrote back. My heart jumped. "You? You have her picture?" He nodded faintly. "I kept it all these years because she looked like someone who understood loss without letting it turn her cruel." He exhaled weak, fading. "And Jonathan, she's not the only one who wrote to me." I stiffened. "What do you mean?" He closed his eyes. There were more letters. From her? No. His breathing shuddered. From Carter. My blood ran cold. "Dad," I whispered. "Carter died that night." He opened his eyes. "Yes." A trembling pause. "But he wrote to me before he did." For several seconds, I thought the machines in the room had stopped working. Everything felt silent, suspended as if the very air had paused to absorb what my father had just said. There were more letters, not from her, from Carter. My pulse stuttered. "Dad," I whispered slowly, "how could Carter have written to you? He cut me off with a weak shake of his head. "No, son, not after the river. Before." He struggled for breath, eyes glassy with exhaustion and memory. "He wrote to me the night before he died." I felt my entire body go still. "He didn't give it to me," Dad continued. "He wasn't planning to. Maybe he was too embarrassed. Maybe he thought he'd wait for the right moment. Or maybe," he swallowed painfully, "maybe he knew he wouldn't get another morning." The room felt too quiet, too small, too full of ghosts. "I found it in his pack," Dad whispered, "when I tried to pull him out of the mud. When I tried to bring him with me." My throat tightened. "You found a letter?" "A small one, folded twice, stuffed between his canteen and a ration bar. I didn't even realize what it was until days later when we were reassigned and ordered to clear our gear." His eyes drifted upward, like he could still see the letter between dirt and blood. It was addressed to me. I froze. "To you?" He nodded weakly. "Yes." It said, "To Private Thomas Hale to read when you're back home." My breath left me in a soft, stunned exhale. "I didn't open it right away," Dad said. "I couldn't. I was barely holding myself together as it was. And then when I finally did," he paused, breath trembling. "It broke me." His voice thinned into a rasp. "Because it wasn't a letter about war. It wasn't about missions or fear or the things we carried. It was a goodbye disguised as gratitude." He swallowed, as if he knew. "What? What did he say?" I asked softly. Dad closed his eyes. He thanked me. For what? For being his friend. A tear rolled down his cheek. He told me I was the only one in the squad who talked to him like he wasn't just another scared kid. He said I reminded him of his brother, said I made him feel safe. He took a slow, painful breath, and then he said his only hope was that if anything happened to him, I'd tell his sister he wasn't afraid when the end came. My heart twisted. He wasn't asking me to save him, Dad said. He was asking me to be a witness to his life, to send his love forward. His fingers twitched against the blanket, and I failed him. I shook my head fiercely. You didn't even know." "I knew enough." He snapped with surprising force. Then his voice cracked. "Jonathan, I left the letter behind." The words hit like shrapnel. "Dad," I murmured. "I was supposed to bring it home," he whispered. "I was supposed to carry it back, deliver it, speak for him. But in the chaos after the ambush, I left everything behind. His pack, his gear, his letter. Everything." He shut his eyes tight, face breaking. "I abandoned the last thing he ever wrote." I felt tears burn through my vision. "You didn't abandon him," I said. "War tore everything apart. You were fighting to survive." "No," he whispered. "I was fighting myself." He inhaled shakily. When I finally got home, I convinced myself the letter had been destroyed, buried, lost. I told myself there was nothing left to deliver, that it wasn't my fault. He turned his head toward me, eyes hollow. But it was my fault. I shook my head. Dad, stop, you can't. He gripped my wrist suddenly, weak but desperate. I found the letter again. Silence swallowed the room. What? My voice cracked. You found it? He nodded slowly. It was inside the footlocker, at the very bottom. I don't know how it survived. My pack must have been recovered and returned with my things. I must have shoved everything inside without looking. His breath trembled. And when I opened it years later, the letter was there. His handwriting, his words. A tremor moved through him, deep and painful. And I couldn't bring myself to read it a second time. My heart crumpled. Why? I whispered. Because the first time shattered me, and the second time he swallowed hard. Felt like reopening a grave. I closed my eyes. Dad, you kept it because it mattered. No, he corrected gently. I kept it because I didn't know how to let it go. He exhaled soft, fading. Jonathan, I want you to read it. My breath hitched. Me? Yes. His voice was barely a breath now. And after you do, I want you to put it where it belongs, with his sister. He nodded faintly. Yes. A long pause. Along with my unsent letter, and the half I lost, and the harmonica. His fingers trembled. Every piece, every word, every truth. I squeezed his hand, gently, reverently. I'll take them, I whispered. I'll deliver them. He stared at me with fragile hope. I need you to finish what I couldn't. I will, I said. His breathing thinned, each inhale shallower than the last. This is the part, he whispered, where I tell you the hardest truth. I braced myself. What truth? I asked quietly. He looked straight into my eyes, not as a broken man, not as a dying man, but as a father finally laying down a 50-year burden. Carter didn't die thinking I abandoned him, he said. His lips trembled. He died thinking I'd come back because I told him I would. The room went still. My hand tightened around his. Dad? His voice was barely sound. And I didn't. A sob broke out of him, small, weak, but shattering. And I need you to forgive me. I bent forward, pressing my forehead to his hand, tears streaming. I forgive you, I whispered into his skin. For all of it, for everything. He exhaled a long, shaky release, like a man finally laying down the weight of half a century. His grip loosened, but he managed to whisper one more sentence. There's just one more thing, Jonathan. I lifted my head. What is it, Dad? He stared at me with fading but urgent eyes. I wasn't alone that night. When my father said I wasn't alone that night, something in the room shifted. The heater hummed. The light above his bed flickered. The snow outside pressed a quiet white glow against the window. But inside me, the air tightened like the story he'd been hiding all his life had just taken its final breath before surfacing. I swallowed hard. Dad, I whispered. What do you mean you weren't alone? He blinked slowly, his eyes drifting toward the ceiling, as though the truth lived there just out of reach. I told you about Carter, he murmured, about Sang, about the two boys the river took. He inhaled a shaky breath. But there was someone else, someone nobody ever mentions because nobody ever knew. I leaned closer, heart pounding. Who? His lips trembled. A man from our unit. I blinked. Another soldier? No, Dad whispered. Not exactly. His voice scraped like dry leaves dragged across pavement. He wasn't there as a soldier that night. He wasn't part of Bravo Company anymore. He'd been reassigned a month before. But he came back, alone, against orders. My pulse raced. Came back? Why? To see the river again, my father said. To see where he'd survived something he thought he shouldn't have. He grimaced, fighting a wave of pain. His name was Porter, Sergeant William Porter, tall, broad shoulders. Smoked more than any man I ever met. Always joked he'd lived to Chin Mui because only the nicotine kept the jungle bugs away. A faint, pained smile flickered over his face. But Porter, he wasn't right after the ambush, 2 months earlier. He'd watched his best friend bleed out beside him, said he could still feel the warmth on his hands, said he could still hear him whisper. Dad closed his eyes, chest trembling. Porter shouldn't have been out there. He wasn't mentally fit. Everyone knew it. But the command didn't send anyone home for nightmares. My throat tightened. What was he doing there, Dad? I whispered. He was wandering, Dad said, looking for something he had lost. Maybe his friend, maybe himself. He paused, breath faltering, and he saw everything. My heart dropped. He saw Carter fall, Dad said. He saw Sang drown. He saw me turn back for them. He saw the lieutenant drag me away, his eyes filled with tears. And he saw me break. I felt a cold tremor move through me. Dad, did he tell anyone? No. Why not? My father's expression softened strangely, almost painfully. Because he was just as broken as I was. The words landed heavy in the quiet room. He didn't judge me, Dad whispered. Didn't blame me. Didn't say a word. He just put a hand on my shoulder and said, we survive or we don't, but guilt ain't saving nobody. Dad let out a breath that sounded like a collapsing foundation. I hated him for saying that. Hated him for trying to make it simple. Nothing about that night was simple. He turned his head toward me, eyes glossy and distant. After the war, he came to see me. I stiffened. He came to Oregon? I asked. Yes, Dad whispered. Twice. Once in Baimui and once in Tamui. I felt a shock ripple through me. What did he want? Dad's lips pressed into a fragile line. To talk, to make peace, to tell me that we couldn't have saved those boys. I shook my head slowly. And did you believe him? No. A single tear slid down his cheek. I wanted him to tell me I did wrong, that I failed, that I deserved the guilt. He swallowed. But he wouldn't. He kept saying the same thing. It was war. We were boys, and we weren't God. His voice cracked, and maybe that's why I pushed him away, because I needed someone to blame, and I chose myself. The heart monitor beeped softly, steady but slowing. What happened to Porter? I asked. Dad's expression darkened. He drank, he murmured heavily, tried to outrun what followed him home, just like I did. A pause, a breath. He died in Mutngin Chincham Tamui Ba alone, in a motel off Highway Chinmui Bai. The weight of that truth punched through my chest. He carried the river with him, Dad whispered. Same as me. His voice grew even softer, like it was sinking into the deepest part of him. But before he died, he left something for me. My breath caught. A box, Dad said. Small, wooden, wrapped in newspaper. The motel owners mailed it to me after they found my name inside. He inhaled shakily. I put it in the footlocker the day it arrived, and I've never opened it. Why? I whispered. His eyes drifted toward the ceiling again, because I didn't want to know if he'd forgiven me or condemned me. A long pause. Because I didn't want to know if he still saw me as the man from the river or something worse. A tear slid down his cheek. And now, Jonathan, that box is yours. My chest tightened. You want me to open it? He nodded faintly. Yes, but not now. Not while I'm still here. Open it when the noise stops, when you're alone, when you're ready. I swallowed the lump in my throat. What if it hurts? I asked. He closed his eyes. It will. His breathing weakened, trembling through his ribs. But there's something inside it you need to know. Something I couldn't carry. Something he saw that night that I never told you. My heartbeat thudded. What did he see, Dad? He turned his head slowly, eyes filled with the last flicker of urgency he had left. He saw something in Carter's hand. I froze. What was it? My voice nearly broke. My father's answer came out in the faintest whisper. A photograph. My breath hitched. What kind of photograph? He swallowed, trembling, of his sister. I felt the world tilt. And Jonathan, she wasn't alone in it. I leaned closer, my voice barely forming. Who was in the photo? His eyes locked onto mine with the weight of a truth he'd carried too long. You, he whispered. For a moment, I thought my father's mind had finally slipped beyond the edge that his dying brain was mixing memory and fever, faces and ghosts, past and present. But then I saw his eyes, clear, focused, haunted in a way that had nothing to do with confusion. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't delirious. He was remembering. "Dad, what do you mean the girl in the photograph was with me?" My voice cracked as it left my throat. He swallowed painfully, breath rattling like a loose hinge in the dark. "You were just a toddler," he whispered. 2 years old, maybe 3. Your mother took you to a county fair near Grants Pass. There was a little booth where they took Polaroids. A man walking by offered to take a picture of you both. She didn't think anything of it. I frowned hard. "I don't remember that." "You weren't supposed to," he murmured, "but I did. I remembered your mother bringing the photograph home. She stuck it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a fish. You're sitting in her lap. She's wearing a straw hat. You're holding a red balloon." I blinked, stunned by how specific it all was. "What does that have to do with Carter?" I asked. His breath hitched. That photograph disappeared a week later. A cold shiver crept down my spine. Your mother thought she'd misplaced it. I thought she'd mailed it to her sister. Neither of us worried. We had hundreds of photos of you. He let out a shaky, fragile exhale. But years later, Porter told me he saw a photograph in Carter's hand, and when he described it, a tremor moved through his chest. I knew exactly which one it was. I felt my heartbeat stumble. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Dad, that photo was taken years after Carter died." "I know," he rasped, "but it wasn't the same photo. It was the original." My mind reeled. "That doesn't make any sense." He squeezed my hand weakly, not forceful, but desperate. "It does, if you know the truth." I stared at him, breath trembling. "What truth?" He shut his eyes, gathering what little strength he had left, as though this final secret demanded more from him than any wound he carried. "Your mother didn't misplace that photograph," he whispered. "It was stolen." "By who?" He opened his eyes. "By Porter." My stomach clenched. Why would he do that? Dad's gaze drifted somewhere far beyond the hospital lights, back into a jungle that never let him go. "Because Porter knew something we didn't," he said softly. "Something he tried to warn me about. Something in the picture." Silence thickened in the room. When he saw that photograph years later, Dad said, in Carter's hand, he realized it wasn't coincidence. My pulse hammered in my ears. "What did he see?" I asked. Dad's breath shuddered. "Look closer at the picture," he whispered. "Not at you. Not at your mother. Look at the background." He swallowed. "There's a man standing behind you both, half out of frame, wearing a green jacket, with a scar on his jaw." A deep, icy stillness crawled into my bones. Porter recognized him. The room felt suddenly colder. "Recognized him from where?" I asked, though I already sensed the answer expanding like a shadow behind me. Dad stared straight into my eyes. "From the river." My heart stopped. "Dad," my voice shook. "Are you saying—" "He wasn't a stranger at the fair," Dad whispered. "He wasn't some passerby. He wasn't someone who just happened to be there when the picture was taken." His chest rose, fell, stuttered. "He was one of the men across the river that night. One of the ones who fired. One of the ones who ambushed us. One of the ones who watched Carter fall." I felt my breath freeze. "And Porter found him," Dad continued. "Years later, at a gas station off highway, Mochamchin Muichin, following your mother, watching you." A wave of cold terror washed through me. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would he?" My father closed his eyes, not in fear, but in surrender, because war doesn't end just because we leave the battlefield. His voice lowered until it was almost nothing. "Porter threatened him, told him if he ever went near you again, he'd finish what the jungle didn't." I stared at my father in stunned horror. "Did Mom know?" "No." He shook his head weakly. "She never knew." Porter made sure of that. His breathing weakened again, shallow, thread thin. "That's why Porter came to see me twice, to make sure I understood, to make sure I knew we weren't done paying for that night." The world around me felt blurry, unreal. "Dad," I whispered, "why didn't you tell me this before?" He turned his head toward me, eyes fragile but resolute. "Because I didn't want you growing up afraid of shadows, like I did." He inhaled with effort, "and because that man is gone now." Porter confirmed it before he died. "The past can't touch you anymore." His breathing faltered again. "But the truth can." I swallowed hard, tears rising. What happened to the photograph? He turned his gaze to the ceiling, as if seeing it one last time. It's in the footlocker. A long silence. Then he whispered, "That picture, that man, that night, they're all connected, Jonathan. Carter knew him, Porter knew him, and now you have to know him too." My throat tightened painfully. Why? He gave me one of the saddest smiles I have ever seen on a human face. Because he wasn't there to kill us. My breath caught. He was there to save someone. My heart thundered. "Save who?" I whispered. Dad's answer came out in a faint, trembling breath. "You." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. His words, "He was there to save you," echoed through the room like someone had opened a door and let in a cold wind from another lifetime. "Dad," my voice cracked. "What do you mean he was there to save me? I wasn't even born." He didn't answer right away. He stared toward the window, snow reflecting soft white light across his hollow cheeks. His chest rose and fell unevenly, as if every breath was borrowed time. Finally, he turned to me. "You weren't born," he whispered, "but you were already the reason I survived." I felt a tremor run through my entire body. He swallowed hard, painful, deliberate. "That man, the one behind you in the photograph, the one Porter recognized from the river," he paused, breath shaking. "He wasn't hunting us that night. He wasn't stalking us. He wasn't part of the ambush." I stared at him, frozen. He was trying to stop it. My heart hammered. But he shot at you," I whispered. "No," Dad rasped. "Someone else did. Someone behind him. Someone eager for blood." His voice dropped into a fragile, dying whisper. "He was a deserter." The word hung heavy in the air. "A deserter?" I repeated. "Yes," Dad breathed. "He walked away from his unit, away from the war, away from killing. He was trying to get home to his family." He coughed, wincing, "To a baby girl, newborn, only a few months old." My breath hitched. "The one in his photograph," Dad said. "The one he carried in his pocket the way Carter carried his sister's name." A wave of realization washed over me, slow, cold, devastating. "That girl," I whispered, "she grew up." "Yes," Dad said, "and she came to America with her mother after the war. They were refugees. Porter verified it." I ran a trembling hand through my hair. "And the man at the fair, the stranger in the background of our picture," Dad nodded weakly. "He was her father." My hands went cold. "But why would he follow us?" I whispered. Dad closed his eyes, breath shallow. "He wasn't following you. He was trying to see if I was the man who spared him." My heart twisted. "Wait," I said, pulse stuttering. "Did you spare him?" Dad blinked slowly. "Yes." Silence. Then, the day after the river, we found him hiding near an abandoned field hut. He was wounded, starving, delirious. The lieutenant wanted to finish him. Two men raised rifles. Dad's voice shook, but I stepped in front of them. Told them he was just a scared kid. Told them to let him run. His breath trembled, and they did. I pressed a hand to my mouth, the weight of the truth swelling like a tide. "And that's why he was at the fair," I whispered, "to make sure the man who saved him still existed." Dad nodded faintly. "And to thank you." A tear slipped down his cheek, but he was afraid. Afraid of being seen, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of bringing danger to his daughter. So he kept his distance. My chest ached. "Did he ever try to talk to you?" Dad shook his head. "No. But Porter did. Porter followed him, cornered him, asked him why he kept appearing." Dad's voice dropped to a whisper, and he said, "I owe that man my life. And because of him, my daughter lives. I just want to see the kind of world he made." I pressed my hands together, trembling. "But he disappeared," I whispered. "Why?" Dad exhaled, slow, final. "Because he died not long after the fair." My stomach sank. "What happened?" "Tuberculosis," my father murmured. "It took him quickly. But before he died, he gave Porter something." "What?" Dad looked at me, tired, but full of a strange, solemn calm. "The photograph." My heart thudded. "The one you saw at the fair?" I asked. "Yes," Dad breathed. "The original. The one of you and your mother. The one he kept because it proved I lived long enough to build a life, he swallowed. And another photograph, one of his daughter, a small girl with pigtails, missing front tooth, smiling like she'd swallowed the sun. My breath trembled. Why give it to Porter? Because he wanted me to have it. He wanted me to know she lived, that she survived, because I let him go. Dad's eyes softened. He wanted me to know that even in war, mercy mattered. He gripped my hand, weak, trembling, but steady enough to anchor one last truth. Jonathan, everything I've carried, everything I've drowned under, all the guilt, all the nightmares. He paused, breath shaking. I forgot there was one thing I did right. His voice fell to a fragile whisper. I saved a father, and in doing so, I saved a child. A tear slid down my cheek. And now, he whispered, that child is alive somewhere in America, a woman with her own life, her own family, her own story. My throat tightened, and she has something that belongs to us, he said. A piece of the river that didn't drown. I leaned closer, tears falling freely. Dad, his eyes met mine soft, pleading, filled with the last flicker of hope he would ever carry. Find her, he whispered. Tell her I never forgot her father. His hand slipped weakly in mine. Tell her he wasn't alone at the end. His voice thinned to a final, fading thread. And tell her that mercy survives war, even if soldiers don't. A long silence followed, deep, complete, final. His breath settled, then slowed, then stopped. The monitor went flat with a soft, steady hum, the sound of a river finally quiet. I leaned over him, forehead against his hand, and whispered the only answer I had left. I'll find them, Dad, all of them. I'll bring them home. And for the first time in 50 years, the war ended. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. Some stories sit lightly on the heart. This wasn't one of them. Tonight, we walked with a son through the final hours of his father's life, a veteran who carried a battlefield inside him for 50 years and finally laid it down. Stories like this remind us of something powerful, that the people we love often fight wars we never see. That silence can be heavier than any uniform, and that mercy, even in the darkest places, can ripple across generations. If this story touched you, moved you, made you think of someone you've lost, or someone you wish you could speak to one more time, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here, more than you know. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, stories about family, forgiveness, sacrifice, and the courage to speak at the very end. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you never miss another conversation at our table. On behalf of our team here at Kitchen Table Talks, thank you for listening with an open heart. I'm Pat Sajak. Take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and above all, take care of the stories you carry. We'll see you next time.